on through.
Well, as you make that espresso, Richard, you know, people portray you as this indefatigable cheerleader for the war, but in fact you've been highly critical of the war at various points. What do you think were the two or three biggest mistakes that were made in the war from 2003 onward?
I think the most serious, the seminal mistake, was getting into an occupation. The day Baghdad fell, we should have handed political authority to Iraqis. We should have said to a group of prominent Iraqis, and we all knew pretty much who they were,
Sure.
Take responsibility, form an interim government, prepare for elections. We will be there to help you, but you've got to step up to this challenge. We can remove Saddam Hussein. We can open the door to a decent representative government, but we can't create it for you. You've got to do that. And instead, we sent 8,000 Americans to live in the green zone and administer Iraq the way you would administer Montgomery County. We had people from every department of the government. Many of them never left that protected green zone. They had almost no contact with Iraq. And they applied American thinking and American procedures and American talents, which work in America but didn't work in Baghdad.
And they made hundreds and thousands of regulatory decisions, stalling the development of cell phone towers, for example, for 9 months in Iraq because Bremer wanted the FCC to come over and advise on interoperability regulations between carriers of cell phones.
It was
this was a mess at this
It was an absurd transplantation. And as happens sometimes in medical transplantation, the
host
body rejected
it.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
And so it didn't work, and we lost at least 2 years.
Bremer was a mistake?
Disaster.
Say why?
Disaster. And it wasn't just Bremer. Sending anyone to perform that role was a mistake. We shouldn't have been there doing that. We should have been there backing up an Iraqi government.
We were seeing Bremer in November 2003 in one of the Baghdad palaces of Saddam Hussein. He's wearing this Heritage Foundation necktie, bragging to me that he has created farm subsidies in Iraq, the first time Iraq has had farm subsidies in its history. And he's proud of this.
And we ought to be getting rid of ours.
Exactly. Yeah. Thanks. One last question. If you had to do it all over again, and you weren't the only one advising in favor of the war, would you have, if you knew this is how the Bush administration was going to go about it, would you have said, let's do it, or let's do something else?
If I'd been in a position to do so, I would have said, I'm in favor of removing Saddam Hussein, but only if we have an appropriate strategy for what happens after. And my view of the appropriate strategy is we establish an Iraqi government in exile before we even go in, with a mandate to prepare for elections. And under those circumstances, I think the risks were entirely commensurate with the threat faced and the possible rewards. If I'd known we were going to get into an extended occupation and turn a liberation into an occupation, so that the people we needed to work with, instead of being co-liberators, became collaborators, I would have had serious second thoughts about whether we should make the sort of frontal assault we made.
Well, Richard, thanks for the espresso. Thanks for coming on Pajamas Media. For Pajamas Media, I'm Richard Perle.